SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation. SLT Mobitel Fiber, the fiber of the nation.
Surf Excel නම් භාගයයි මාසයකට වඩා රිදි සෝතයි.
Tonight, a bright future. India's Foreign Secretary met the President today, who outlined his plans for a safe and secure Sri Lanka that enables diaspora return and ensures India's security. Terms and conditions. The Foreign Minister tells Parliament that the government is open to constructive international criticism.
That being said, Mr. Speaker, we do not need to compromise our independence, national sovereignty, nor our self-respect as a nation.
Who done it? Parliament heats up over the Pandora Papers as the plot thickens with government allegations. A new hope. Grades 1 to 5 in schools with under 200 students to reopen on the 21st of this month in all provinces. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Tuesday, the 5th of October, 2021.
Lever Ayush Kahasabang Sandak Wage Babalana Pivituru Samakata.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening, welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhamik Eknai. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today told visiting Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla that he expects to create an environment which enables the return of the Tamil people who left the country. During a meeting between the two, the head of state moved to allay any concerns India may harbour about Sri Lanka's close ties with China and assured that Sri Lanka will be mindful of India's security concerns. Visiting Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla met with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa at the Presidential Secretariat this morning. During the talks, the head of state emphasised the importance of making the country's people aware about bilateral decisions and acting with majority consensus, with both pros and cons of the decisions also well articulated, while stressing the need to reinforce the friendship and the relationship the two countries had in the 60s and 70s. The President expressed expectation of India's support in taking forward former Prime Minister Sirimava Bandaranaike's proposal of turning the Indian Ocean region into a zone of peace, which she made in 1971. Meanwhile, the President had also gone into detail about the trade deficit between the two countries. Further, the urgent need to act while understanding the strong points and weaknesses of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution too was highlighted by the President. President Gotabaya told the Indian Foreign Secretary that it is his expectation to create an environment which enables the return of the Tamil people who left the country, and also alluded to the invitation he made to the Tamil diaspora at the United Nations. Shringla was also briefed on the development drive in the north and east, with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa emphasising that more than 90% of the land in the two regions have been returned to the people. The head of state, meanwhile, pledged that he will not let Sri Lanka be used for any purpose which will compromise India's security. After elaborating at length the ties with China, the President assured the Indian Foreign Secretary that there's no need to harbour any concerns in that regard either. Touching on investment, the head of state made an open invitation to Indian investors to make investments in the island, as a broad range of opportunities have been created in the country. On the Trincomalee oil tank farm, President Gotabaya told Shringla that the subject minister is given the responsibility of resolving the matter in a way which would benefit both countries. Tourism between the two countries was also discussed at length, while attention had also fallen on broadening training opportunities for Sri Lankan military personnel in India. While noting that the ideas of the two countries are similar, Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla had said that it is possible to reinforce the friendship between the two nations and take it forward. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa also told Shringla that the Indian Prime Minister will be extended an invitation for a state visit to Sri Lanka. Now, following his return from the United Nations General Assembly in New York, Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Pires today briefed Parliament on the progress of his engagements with partner countries on many issues, chief among them being Sri Lanka's commitment to human rights and reconciliation. Professor Peiris informed Parliament that Sri Lanka's stance on the issues have been clearly articulated to the international community at the UN, primarily on its willingness to increase engagement with the global community. He, however, insisted that it will not happen at the cost of Sri Lanka's sovereignty.
Foreign Minister Professor G.L. Peiris addressed Parliament today, where he outlined the progress made during his recent visits with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa on official appearances at international fora. The Foreign Minister stated that the government is open to acknowledging its challenges and welcomes constructive criticism from the international community, however not at the cost of Sri Lanka's sovereignty.
Equally important for Sri Lanka, Mr. Speaker, these visits provided us with the opportunity to address the international community at bilateral and multilateral levels regarding recent domestic developments and difficulties we have faced in Sri Lanka on critical national issues related to human rights and reconciliation, and to correct any inaccurate or biased perceptions. I concluded my statement to the Human Rights Council in Geneva by stating that we are open in acknowledging our challenges, and as a responsible and democratic government, we are committed to achieving tangible progress on the entire range of issues relating to accountability, reconciliation, human rights, peace and sustainable development. We have taken the position that we do recognize the need to address these challenges, and in that effort we need to be open and responsive to constructive criticism and international overtures made in good faith. That being said, Mr. Speaker, we do not need to compromise our independence, national sovereignty, nor our self-respect as a nation.
Professor Peiris added that the government also recognizes that much effort is needed in order to utilize local mechanisms to ensure the right kinds of bridges are built between communities.
The other great challenge we need to overcome is that of social cohesion and unity. We need to build bridges rather than walls. We need to reach out to all segments of society and repair the trust and confidence placed in the government at successive elections in 2019 and 2020. As President Rajapaksa said in New York, fostering greater accountability, restorative justice, and meaningful reconciliation through domestic institutions is essential to achieve lasting peace.
However, the Foreign Minister also warned of the continued threat to unity from extremism and reminded Parliament that national security must not necessarily be looked upon as a negative, but as a way to ensure that freedom can be enjoyed by the people in a safe and secure environment.
One of the principal challenges to this unified sense of purpose, Mr. Speaker, is extremism and its progeny, terrorism. We as a representative government are taking all measures in close collaboration with international partners to ensure human security in its widest sense. The guaranteeing of individual freedoms and liberties is not antithetical to the concept of national security. Indeed, it is a stable and secure international and domestic order that enables the enjoyment of individual rights in all their aspects.
The Foreign Minister then also called for new thinking in dealing with extremist groups.
In an interconnected world, such movements and extremist ideologies make nonsense of previously impenetrable national boundaries. Our response, Mr. Speaker, must be equally dynamic, adaptive and resilient. During my exchanges with ministerial colleagues from friendly countries in New York and elsewhere, we have placed a sharp focus on close cooperation, intelligence gathering and sharing, and collective action to address issues of funding and interdiction of these criminal networks.
Professor Peiris also expressed the government's intentions to do everything in its power to ensure that Sri Lanka never sees another day of violence, but instead enjoys only the best of what its future can offer.
Violence robbed Sri Lanka of thousands of lives and decades of prosperity in the past half-century. My government is committed to ensuring that such violence never takes place in Sri Lanka again. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I wish to reassure the people of Sri Lanka that we will not rest in our efforts to garner the best outcomes for the nation through continued proactive engagement with the international community.
Opposition and government members engaged in a heated exchange of accusations over the Pandora Papers leak that linked former Minister Nirupama Rajapaksa and her spouse Thirukumar Nadesan to real estate investments in UK and Australia. With the opposition accusing the duo of having enriched themselves through Rajapaksa family ties, State Minister Shehan Semasinga pointed out that the alleged transactions and consultancy payments cited in the report by the International Community of Investigative Journalists took place between 1990 and the year 2000 during a United National Party government.
දැන් ලෝකේ නම් කරපු කීප දෙනෙක්ගේ නම් එනකොට දැන් මෙන්න නිරූපමාන රාජපක්ෂ නෝන මහත්තයා ගැනත් දැන් කියනවා. දැන් මොකද්ද දන්නවද ගාන? ඇමරිකන් ඩොලර් මිලියන් 168ක්. මේක රුපියල් වලින් ගත්තාම රුපියල් මිලියන් 35000ක් එක පුද්ගලයෙකුගේ එක පවුලක වත්කමක් හැටියට සඳහන් වෙනවා. මේ රාජපක්ෂ කියන නම සඳහන් වෙනවා. අපි ලැජ්ජයි ශ්‍රී ලාංකිකයෝ හැටියට මෙහෙම දෙයක් සිද්ධ වෙනකොට. කරගෙන යනකොට අපිට අහුවෙනවා දැන් මේ කවුද නිරූපමා රාජපක්ෂ? මගේ අම්මේ රාජපක්ෂ පවුලේ ඥාතිවරියක්. එතකොට කවුද තිරු නඩේසන්? නිරූපමා රාජපක්ෂ මොනෝන මහත්තයා කසාද බඳු මහත්තයා. මේක බරපතල මඩ පැල්ලමක්. ඒ නිසා කරුණා කරලා කරන්න තියෙන්නේ මේ ගැන පරීක්ෂණයක් කරන්න.
දැන් අද තිරු නඩේසන් පිළිබඳව කතා කරනවා තුෂාර ඉන්දුනිල්. හැබැයි තුෂාර ඉන්දුනිල් දන්නේ නැතුව ඇති විද්‍යා අමරපාලගෙන් කවුද යපුණ කියලා. විද්‍යා අමරපාලගේ අර පැනමා පේපර්ස් වල තිබ්බ සල්ලි කාගේ සල්ලිද කියලා දන්නේ නැද්ද? ඒ හින්දා තමුන්නාසේ නොදන්න ඒවා කතා කරන්න යන්න එපා. මේ වෙබ්සයිට් එක කියවලා නැහනේ. මේ Facebook එකේ තියෙන බහුබූත ටිකක් අරගෙන හැවිල්ලා ඒකේ තිබ්බේවා කියනවා. දැන් තිරු නඩේෂන් ගැන කතා කරා. මේ වෙබ්සයිට් එකේ කියනවා හොයාගෙන තියෙන්නේ 1990 2004 ඉපැයීම් කියලා. ඒ ආපු ප්‍රමාණයන් කොහමද? ඒ ආපු විදිහ කොහමද? ඒ කන්සල්ටන්සි වලින් ගත්ත ප්‍රමාණයන් පිළිබඳව සඳහන් වෙනවා. හැබැයි මතක තියාගන්න දැන් ටිරෝන් ෆර්නෑන්ඩෝ මැතිතුමා පොතක් ලියනවා. Through Winds of Fire. මේ පොතේ තියෙනවා ඔබතුමා ඔය ඇඟිල්ල දික් කරන්න ඕනේ කාටද කියලා. මේ පොතේ පැහැදිලිව සඳහන් වෙනවා 38 වෙනි පිටුවේ කොහොමද ජේ.ආර්. ජයවර්ධන මැතිතුමා එදා චන්ද්‍රිකා බණ්ඩාරනායක මැතිණියට අගමැතිකම අරන් දෙන්න කියලා ඩී.බී. විජේතුංග මැතිතුමාට බලපෑම් කරපු හැටි 1990 2000 කාලය තුල ඔය කියන ඉපැයීම් කරා නම් ඒකට සහයෝගය දක්වන කවුද සහයෝගය දක්වලා තියෙන්නේ? මේ තිරු නඩේෂන් කියන පුද්ගලයා මේ කියන ආයතා ගනුදෙනු වලට සම්බන්ධ වෙලා හිටියා නම් ඒකට උදව් කරලා තියෙන්නේ රණසිංහ ප්‍රේමදාස ඊළඟට ජේ.ආර්. ජයවර්ධන ඩී.බී. විජේතුංග එහෙමනම් චන්ද්‍රිකා බණ්ඩාරනායක කුමාරතුංග කියන රාජ්‍ය නායකයෝ කොහෙද මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ ජනාධිපතිතුමා ආණ්ඩු කරේ 2008 කලින් ඊළඟට ඒක විතරක් නෙවෙයි Innocence of the Pen Question by Victor Ivan. This book clearly says how it has happened. මේක කියනවා කොහොමද නැවතත් ජේ.ආර්. ජයවර්ධන මැතිතුමා ඩී.බී. විජේතුංග මහත්තයාට බලපෑම් කරේ තිරු නඩේෂන් කියන පුද්ගලයාත් එක්ක ඇයි ඒ බලපෑම කරේ චන්ද්‍රිකා බණ්ඩාරනායක කුමාරතුංග මැතිණියව අගමැති කරන්න කියලා. එහෙනම් ඉතා පැහැදිලිනේ මම නැවතත් කියනවා මේ කියන චෝදනාව රාජපක්ෂවරුන්ට විරුද්ධව එල්ල කරන අයට මම ඉතාම පැහැදිලිව කියනවා ඒ චෝදනාව එල්ල කරන්න සජිත් ප්‍රේමදාස මැතිතුමාට එතුමා දන්නවා ඇති එතුමාගේ පියා එක්ක තිබ්බ ගනුදෙනු මොනවාද කියලා. ඊළඟට චන්ද්‍රිකා මැතිණිය දන්නවා ඇති මොනවද තිබ්බ ගනුදෙනු කියලා. ඊළඟට ජේ.ආර්. ජයවර්ධන මැතිතුමා දන්නවා ඇති මම දන්නේ කාගෙන්ද අහන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ඩී.බී. විජේතුංග මැතිතුමා දන්නවා ඇති ඒ කරපු ගනුදෙනු මොනවද කියලා. දැන් ඔබතුමාලා සල්ලි වලට ඕන දෙයක් කරන අයනේ. අපි දැක්කනේ ඇලෝසියස්ත් එක්ක කොහොමද ගනුදෙනු කරේ කියලා. බලයට ඇවිල්ලා දවස් 28 මහ බැංකුව කඩනවා. මහ බැංකුව කඩපු සල්ලි ඇලෝසියස්ගෙන් අරගෙන ඡන්ද කරනවා. විලි ලැජ්ජයි.
We will see you shortly on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
Big 3.
Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, the governors of all 9 provinces have decided to resume schooling for students in grades 1 to 5 on the 21st at schools with less than 200 students. This decision comes after the Ministry of Education announced plans last month to reopen schools with under 200 students under the first phase of the reopening. Addressing the media after the Governor's meeting, Governor of the Uva Province, A.J.M. Muzammil, said that coordinating committees of the relevant province and members of parliament will be informed about the schools which are selected for reopening. He added that the process will be conducted in strict adherence to health and safety protocols. Musamil went on to say that teachers, members of non-academic staff and representatives of the school development committees who are fully vaccinated will be allowed to report to work. Secretary of the Sri Lanka College of Paediatricians said today that long COVID, the possible onset of some symptoms even after recovering from the virus, is seen less among children than adults. Though the freedoms have returned following the curfew lift during the daytime, health experts urge people to be mindful of signs of depression, as they could well be carrying around baggage from the lockdown. After the lockdown was lifted on the 1st of this month, people were let loose, given the chance to move about freely in society. Though authorities continue to urge the populace to only make essential journeys, looking at the volume of people on streets makes one question whether that's what's really happening. Though the freedoms have returned, there are some baggage people might be dragging around with them from the wave's peak phase, and they're psychological.
At the height of the illness, many people were in severe fear and anxiety. We all know when we are anxious, anxiety can have physical symptoms as well. We can see your heart will start beating, or we might start breathing fast. We may sweat, our hands may tremble, we may get headaches. So a lot of people thought when they become anxious, when they got these symptoms, especially breathing difficulties and feeling shortness of breath, they thought that they're going to get COVID, and then the anxiety increases. Little by little, that situation is coming down now. People's fear is reducing. Of course, a certain amount of fear is always good, but that will help people to take precautions.
The symptoms of post-COVID, or long COVID, as it is also called, are now well documented. New studies have found that a person who recovers from the virus may suffer from long COVID even after 90 to 180 days after the infection.
Now, in the post-COVID state, people continue to have symptoms like fatigue and lack of energy and shortness of breath. And many people have mild depressive symptoms, which is well known even after other viral infections. Especially after a severe post-COVID infection, many people have symptoms of depression, like persistent sadness, not enjoying the things that you usually do, lack of interest, lack of motivation. They may have poor sleep, feeling tired all the time, and not having the pleasure in the usual pleasurable activities. If these symptoms are there all the time, throughout the day, and it's affecting you and your life or the way you function, I think you need to get help. For the vast majority, this will go off with time.
However, some experts say that constantly dwelling on the virus and its effects may prolong possible long COVID periods in adults. But as for children, it's different.
වාසනාවකට දරුවන්ගේ එවැනි විශේෂ තත්ත්ව දීර්ඝකාලීන පවතින තත්ත්ව සහ විශේෂයෙන්ම දරුවන්ට ඔවුන්ගේ සාමාන්‍ය දිනදා කටයුතු කරගෙන යාමට බලපාන තරම් විශේෂ තත්ත්වයක් ගැන අපිට එහෙම විශේෂයෙන් වාර්තා වෙලා නැහැ. ඒ ඊට හොඳ තත්ත්වයක් සහ දැනට අපිට ලෝකයේ දක්නට ලැබෙන ඒ විස්තර අනුව ඔවුන්ට දීර්ඝකාලීනව තියෙන බලපෑම වැඩිහිටියන්ට සාපේක්ෂව අවමයි.
With the disruptions caused by the pandemic, the people's livelihoods were also adversely impacted. Pondering on these negative effects could well lead to depression. After all, 5% of the adults in the world suffer from depression. That's 1 in 20.
Many people have lost their jobs, they have reduced incomes, they are unable to pay their loans, pay for their children's education, and this has led to stress as well as to depression. Some of them may not have the severe depressive symptoms, but they may get more irritable than usual. So families should recognize these as depressive symptoms.
It is also no secret that frivolous behavior from the part of the public could lead to another surge in new case numbers, which will invariably see the lockdown cycle being repeated. So it is in the hands of the public to break the cycle. After all, there are still more restrictions which are yet to be fully lifted, though people might not realize it. Interprovincial travel is still restricted and workplaces and shops still have capacity limitations.
If these activities are adhered and there will be no adverse consequences, definitely there will be much more relaxation in the coming days. However, if not, probably this will be delayed. So therefore, act responsibly and make sure that we are not going to behave in any way that will promote the spread of the disease.
12 to 15 age group will be next in line.
Sri Lanka recently completed the inoculation of its population above the age of 30. But now the focus is on immunizing those aged between 20 to 29 years, as well as children with comorbidities aged between 12 to 19. The immunizations of these target groups are currently underway in each and every province in the island. The Pfizer vaccine is being used to inoculate children above the age of 12. It is also the only jab deemed suitable by the Strategic Advisory Group of Experts at the World Health Organization for immunizing children.
අපි දෙමාපියන්ට ආරාධනා කරන්න කැමති තවමත් ඔබේ දරුවාට මේ එන්නත ලබා ගැනීම සිදු නොවුනනම් විශේෂයෙන්ම ඔබේ දරුවා දැනට යම්කිසි නිදන්ගත රෝගාබාධයක් සඳහා දීර්ඝකාලීන ප්‍රතිකාර ලබා ගන්නවා නම් ඔබට අදාළ ඔබ සහභාගී වෙන සායනය අමතා හෝ ඒ රෝහල අමතා හෝ එහෙම නැත්නම් ඔබ සම්කිසි දුර බැහැර ප්‍රදේශයක සිටින කෙනෙක් නම් ඔබට ළඟම රජයේ රෝහල වෙත ගිහිල්ලා ඒ දරුවාගේ අදාළ සායනික වාර්තා ඒ වෛද්‍ය වාර්තා ඒ අදාළ වෛද්‍යවරුන්ට ලබා දීමෙන් ඔබේ දරුවා මේ එන්නත ලබා ගැනීම සඳහා ප්‍රථම අධීරදී සුදුසු කෙනෙක්ද කියන එක ඒ වෛද්‍යවරුන් තීරණය කළා. සුදුසු නම් අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම එන්නත ලබා දීම සිදු කෙරේ.
Under the first phase in the child vaccination drive, children above the age of 12 with comorbidities have been the focus. However, the drive will be expanded further in the near future.
අවුරුදු 16ත් 19ත් අතර කාණ්ඩේ සියලු දරුවන්ට විශේෂයෙන් මධ්‍යම පොදු සහතිකපත් උසස් පෙළ සහ සාමාන්‍ය පෙළ විභාගයන්ට මුහුණ දෙන දරුවන්ට ලබා දීම සඳහා අවශ්‍ය සාකච්ඡා මේ දිනවල පවත්වනවා. එහිදී විශේෂයෙන්ම ඒ සම්බන්ධ විශේෂඥ මතය විමසලා ඒ අනුමැතිය ලැබුණු පසු ඊටාම ඉක්මනින් ඒ තත්ත්වයට ආරම්භ කිරීමට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඉදිරියේදී ඒ අධීර සාර්ථක නිම වුණොතින් ඊට පසු අවුරුදු 12ත් 15ත් අතර සියලු දරුවන්ට ලබා දීම ඉදිරියේදී සලකා බැලීමට නියමිතයි.
With that, as of last evening, a total of 14,598,456 people had received at least a single dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Of that number, 11,925,577 people have been fully immunized so far.
Now, renowned Sri Lankan prehistorian and former Director General of the Department of Archaeology, Dr. Derana English, passed away today. Dr. Derana English did his doctoral research at the Harvard University, and his thesis, The Prehistory of Sri Lanka, an Ecological Perspective, is acclaimed as one of the primary source books on South Asian prehistoric archaeology. In the course of his academic career, Dr. Derana English had carried out fieldwork in England, India, the Netherlands and France. He also directed over 20 national and international archaeological projects in Sri Lanka. Dr. Derana English was 79 at the time of his passing. In other local news today, the Supreme Court ordered the Attorney General to direct the Prisons Commissioner to ensure the security of 8 inmates who are incarcerated at the Anuradhapura prison. The order was issued when the fundamental rights petitions filed by the relevant inmates against former State Minister of Prison Management and Prisoners Rehabilitation Lohan Ratwatta was taken up. The petitions were called before Chief Justice Jayantha Jayasuriya and Supreme Court judges Madhur Fernando and S. Thureraja. The Attorney General was further ordered to instruct the Prisons Commissioner and Anuradhapura Prison Superintendent to take necessary measures to provide the said prisoners access to their lawyers. The relevant inmates filed FR petitions alleging that their fundamental rights were violated by the former Prison State Minister, saying that he intimidated them at gunpoint and threatened their lives. The navies of Sri Lanka and Japan concluded a major naval exercise titled Jalan X yesterday that saw vessels from Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force and the Sri Lanka Navy cooperate in search and rescue, divisional tactics and disaster relief operations.
The joint naval exercises named JLAN X held between the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force and the Sri Lankan Navy concluded on a successful note off the coast of Colombo yesterday. The JMSDF ship Kaga, which arrived in Sri Lanka on an official visit on the 2nd of October, took part in the joint naval exercise along with SLNS Sagara of the Sri Lankan Navy. The prime motive of the exercises was to enhance relationships, deepen cooperation between the two countries, and increase bilateral ties in the scope of humanitarian assistance disaster relief. The exercise comprised of search and rescue, divisional tactics, station keeping by distance line, photo exercises, and a farewell pass with the assistance of a ship-borne helicopter from the Kaga. Meanwhile, the Sri Lanka Navy bade customary farewell to the departing Japanese naval vessels after the successful completion of the exercise along with JMSDF ship Murasame in compliance with naval traditions.
Sri Lankan shares closed slightly lower today after hitting a record high in the previous session, hurt by weakness in financial and industrial stocks. The all share price index settled 0.09% lower at 9,533.64 points, while the S&P SL20 index of more liquid stocks fell 0.50 points to close at 3,539.74. With that, here's Dimantha Mathi with a brief report on today's market performance.
The major bull run that we are experiencing in the stock market lost a bit of steam today as the index slightly moved down in value, dipping by around 9 points, but staying above the 9,500 mark to close at 9,533 points. Overall, we saw healthy turnover levels of 4.5 billion rupees, and the number of transactions was onto the high side with just under 40,000 transactions, higher than the previous couple of days. With that, we are still seeing the retail favorite counters in the top of the turnover list, the usual set, which is dominated by the transportation sector and the capital goods sector. But the important factor is that we saw some buying interest coming into the banking sector, which was one of the reasons why the overall index was up at the start of the day.
In the currency market, the rupee meanwhile remains unchanged at 202.99 cents against the US dollar. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee fared against other major currencies during the day. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.